Welcome to the Nourished Soul Podcast, where we talk about all things nourishing to the body, mind, and soul. I'm your host, Dr. Kelli Ritter. Pace, welcome to the show that is partly your show and my show.
Oh my goodness, it feels weird being on this side of it and
Does
not
it?
being the back end.
Yeah.
Nervous to edit this one, having my face in it.
Yeah, well, I think that maybe it won't need a lot of editing, so we'll see. Yeah, but
Hopefully
I
not.
wanted to pull you around to the front of the camera and to the front, and so that people could see you. And well, on YouTube, they'll see you, but they'll hear you on the podcast. And because we're wrapping up the Nourished Soul and we're launching the new podcast, so Quantum Mental Health will be coming out, and I wanted to just honor the work that we've done over the last 3 years. Like, we have 3 seasons. Can you believe that?
It's crazy to me because whenever looking back, it's like I remember every single episode, but I'm like, how has it been 3 years? Because all of them have been so impactful in my life that I'm like, how has it been 3 years?
I know. And when we started talking about doing this and kind of just talking about some of our favorites and some of the highlight moments, I couldn't pick. There's so many that I was like, I don't want to leave anybody out. And every single time that there have been times that I'm like, I'm not sure if this one is really a good match. I feel like I don't know if this is even about nourishing our soul. And it'll be one of my favorite episodes. It'll be something that was personally really helpful for me. So I feel very led every time we do an episode. There's something in it that's been really powerful for me. I don't know about for you.
Absolutely. When you said that, like my first thought was not even like when we have guests on that you feel that way by any means. It's when you're talking alone and you question yourself and you're like, I don't know if this is going to resonate. And every single time you're like, I think it's going to need so much editing. And I sit down and I'm listening to it and I'm like, this needs nothing. This is absolutely perfect. And it always hits like to my soul. So I know it's hitting other people's souls. And I'm like, never question yourself on the words you say because they are so impactful. And for some reason, you always talk about certain things whenever I personally need it. So, in a lot of ways, I feel like this podcast is like only for me and I'm the only one listening to it. Like,
It
I
is.
just, I need it. Like, this is just my therapy session and people happen to join in and listen every now and again, But it's just,
I love that. I really appreciate that because I'm like, oh, Pace. This is gonna be, and it's really funny when I record a solo episode and all through it, I'm like, oh, Pace, this is bad. Like, edit this part out, or can you hear the dog barking or any of those kinds of things? But for me, I felt like this was really for me. So I don't know if you remember when we first started talking about this, I was on the Girl Talk podcast, which you used to be the contact person, like in charge of that, whatever you want to say. You worked for Girl Talk, and you helped put when I was on, you were organizing all of that. And sometime right after that, I was like, I really want to show. Like, it's just for me. It's something that I feel like on my deathbed, I don't want to have not done this
Mhm.
show that I want to do. And I want to talk about the soul. Where is the soul? What is the soul? That was the original. And I reached out to you, I guess, to see if you would help. And you're like, absolutely, no problem. But do you remember that time?
I do. So I was like one of the hosts for Girl Talk podcast. And so I was this side of things and I wanted to get to more of the back end. But what's kind of funny is like how life works is like I love the back end and want to stay in the back end, but I'm also like tempted and like have had the podcast stuff to be ready to start my own podcast. Because here's the thing, I like to talk and I like to hear myself talk, which is terrible, but I don't even need other people to listen. It's like the way that I process. And I think that's what Girl Talk really was for me, is like processing and hearing other people. And so when you said you wanted to start a podcast, I was like, wait, that's literally why I asked you on a Girl Talk, because I want to hear you talk. And so being able to hear you talk more, I'm like, please, I want to be the back end of that.
Well, I appreciate you being on the back end, but I also know that you can be on that. Yeah, I forgot that you were actually the host of that. That makes a lot more sense. Yeah. So much has happened. Like, you're married now. You didn't even know your husband then. Like, can you believe all the things? that have gone
I
on?
I look back and I'm like, there was something we were looking at yesterday, me and Caleb, and it was like 2022. And I was like, did I even know you in 2022? He's like, yeah, the last day you met me. And I was like, that's wild. Like how quickly life happens, and also like how I'm living in an answered prayer. And it's just, I remember crying like to Haley, the founder of Girl Talk, like, when am I going to meet my husband? And here we are. It's
And here
crazy.
we are. You're newly married, and it's so cute. It's just, and it's amazing to me. I was looking back on the episodes because you and I were like, okay, let's look back on the episodes and we'll pick. And I was trying to pick the one where A1, where I learned the most. And I was like, I don't know. I think everybody, I've learned something from everybody that's come on. And I've really enjoyed all of the episodes that we've had, but I actually hit on mine. One of mine where I was like, love is the medicine is what we titled it, which we could talk about how funny you and I are about titles. We're like, eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Okay, sounds good. I mean, we could put a lot more thought into how we, yeah, title these things. It's like we just go with it. We titled it Love is the Medicine. And I didn't even really remember recording that one, but it's been coming up a lot lately because when I think about all that's happened since we started 2021 and how hard that whole time has been for me and what's going on in my life right now, and still like worrying about my child. And I really have to trust that love is available, that the frequency of love is always available. And what I've started really paying attention to is that I think all of the stuff that happens to us or all of the choices that we make is literally creating the vessel for love to flow through us. So when I'm getting ready to do this, I'm doing a workshop this Friday, and I was like, what do I want to tell these practitioners? I mean, really, the work is us doing our own inner work so that we can create a vessel to transmit love, to be the frequency of love comes through us and out. And I think that's what I was talking about on that episode, but that's what came up for me when I was thinking about this.
That one was the medicine for my soul, truly. And it's funny that you're talking about frequencies. I know we talk about that a lot on the podcast, but with you saying that, one of the podcasts that came up for me was one of yours as well. And it was Nourishing Your Nervous System. And you
Yeah.
talked a lot about frequencies. And, like, there for a while before I was, doing this podcast, editing the back end of it, frequencies was hard for me to understand. And what's crazy enough is my dad has really delved into what frequencies are and energy, positive, negative, neutral, like what is energy. And so I've really learned from him. And so with your podcast and with Nourishing Your Nervous System, I'm learning how to lower the anxious energy while also like heighten the love and the joy and the peace of frequencies. I don't know if I'm using all the right terminology. I'm the back end girl, so let's remember that part.
No, I love
But
it.
you talked in that about like what energizes you, what drains you,
Yeah.
where are you truly putting your focus. And I'll just say it. I have a tendency to put my energy where it drains me. And I'm like focusing on what's aggravating me that day and all those things. And I'm really learning that. And Caleb even says it. He's like, put your energy where it's meant to go. The positive, the vibrant side of me that doesn't always get to be shown because I kind of focus on what's aggravating me.
I think that is really important. I appreciate you having the courage to be honest about that because I think that's part of the issue is that a lot of us aren't willing to get really honest about where we are putting the energy and the focus. And I think it's so simple. People are like, well, that can't possibly really change my life, but it can absolutely change your life. Where you're putting your attention and focus will grow. And you really want to be mindful about where that's going. I was just thinking about texts to you where I was like, Pace, go outside, put your feet on the earth,
Yeah,
Right now, go outside. Where are you? Go outside, put your feet on the earth. And, I'm always harping about all the sunlight and but also, I mean, you and I on the back end, we've had texts back and forth of like, it's okay. How many times have I been like, we're not pushing? Like, if we're not in a good place, if either one of us has something going on, there is no need to push this out. This is apparently for you and I only anyway. So, I mean, I really appreciate the listeners. I'm so grateful that people are joining in. And at the same time, I mean, we've been doing this because it's a love that it's a service that we're trying to put out in the world. So, yeah.
absolutely. Constantly my feet on the grass. I'm like, okay, you have been inside for far too long on this computer getting like things edited. I'm like, get outside, please. For all of heavens, get outside.
I know. I like just forget this week's if it gets edited, it gets edited. I want you to go outside right now. It doesn't matter. Yeah, because when we're really stressed, we forget the simple things. And I feel like some of the episodes, especially the solo episodes, I'm talking about things that are just so simple that I'm like, is this too simple? But I think they're good reminders that we forget when we're overwhelmed and stressed, we forget. And if we're focused on the things that were irritating us and not working in our lives, and that is energetically growing, you're right. That's a hard place to be. It's a hard place to think.
Yeah, it's and like getting out of your own head, I think is one of the hardest parts.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So do you have some other episodes that
Yeah.
we want to I want to hear what some of your favorites were.
Yeah. So one of them being Haley Kilpatrick Dozier's podcast, which is a dear friend of both of ours.
Yeah.
And she's just a normal girl doing normal life things and trying to live the healthiest life she can.
Yeah.
And with her girls. And so it was called Mom Sanity,
Yeah.
staying grounded for our kids. And I don't have kids yet, but also you talked deeply about the mitochondria and how, it comes from the mother. So as I'm preparing, I'm newlywed, I'm not ready to have kiddos just yet, but that I can be preparing that mitochondria. I can be getting outside. I can be doing all the things that I need to for my future kids. And I think like
Mhm.
before I'm ready to have kids, I'm like, it's so far. Like, it's not that big of a deal. Like, when it comes kind of thing. But like, I can be doing stuff right now to be helping them. And if I don't do it, I almost feel guilty because I'm like, dang, I could be helping them right now. So
Right.
that was
Yeah.
one of those huge things. But also like realizing like Haley's morning routine of like getting her girls outside. They brush their teeth outside. They brush their hair outside. They do all the things outside. And I'm like, wait, why don't I do that? Like, I normally take my ice roller and ice roll my face while I'm standing outside, but like I could be doing more. And I could be outside for longer in the mornings. And it always just makes me feel so good. And so I think her podcast really just made me realize that, like, yeah, it's going to feel chaotic, even with just me and the dogs. Like, it'll feel a little chaotic in the mornings to like make sure I'm getting outside. I think one of the biggest reasons for me that it would be chaotic is we have a dog next door. We don't have a fence right now. And the dog actually attacked my dog like
Mhm.
a few months ago. So I have a little bit of trauma of like almost being outside in my own house or in
Yeah.
my own yard. And so like for me, I'm like, get outside, go to the bathroom, y'all come back in. Like, we're not staying outside for long. So I'm really trying to heal that and just like stay outside. The
Yeah.
dog's not awake right now.
Yeah. So, that's really big. So, I think we should just stay there for a second because sometimes we have traumatic experiences that are keeping us from something that would be good for us. And but you have to honor that's a real thing and that's stress, that's toxic stress and traumatic stress that happen. And so there's some healing that needs to be done. And we might have to get a little creative sometimes about that, but just really honoring that don't force yourself to do something if it's also right up against, especially a fresh wound, but a wound. Like you wouldn't do that with a gaping wound. Like you would not rub your wound into the dirt and the sand. Like, come on. So I think, and that's a really scary thing that can happen. I've been through that myself. So there's that. And I'm glad that you brought up Haley because we couldn't honor this show and talk about like how long we've been doing this. She was the first person on the show, my first guest on the show. And then our 100th, you're talking about the 100th episode, which I didn't even realize we were coming up on. And you texted me and said, "Hey, you realize this is your 100th episode. I think maybe we need to think about it." And I was like, "Oh, we definitely need to think about it. What's Haley doing?" So I was grateful that she came on to the podcast again, but certainly somebody that's super special to both of us. So, yeah, what are some of the other ones you think?
Well, first I wanted to say with
Yeah.
that real quick is so on wedding day. So Haley was one of my bridesmaids, and on wedding day, she's so funny. She was like, "All right, let's get outside. Everyone touch their feet to the ground. Let's just breathe. Let's get sunlight." And so we were like all looking at the sunlight and the sun rising. It was absolutely perfect to have her there. Like she is the piece that we all need, and I truly think that comes from like her rhythms and the things that she does each and every day. And like some of the things she also talked about, I just wanted to mention is
Yeah.
the barefoot shoes and the acupuncture mat, like the things, the red light therapy, like the things that all of us could be doing each day that are just small little habits that like don't sleep on, like they actually help. And so
Yes.
that's just something I really wanted to mention within that podcast that is huge.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, and always like the parts of these things that I tend to leave out of like, oh yeah,
But yeah,
the
there's
biohacking tools, but I do Haley, she's impressive. Like she's such a love. She's a loving human. I mean, talk about if the medicine is love, like she exudes love in a way that I think is really beautiful. I mean, so do you. I'm not saying
no,
she
of course I know exactly what you're saying. She
she
has this
does.
line about her.
Yeah, but she's also willing to do the work. When she learns about something and she's willing to try things and decide for herself if that's good or not. And yeah, when she commits, and I know, and because we've been on the backside of girl talk in her life, she does not always feel like it. There
Mm.
are many times that she deals with chronic health issues that you would never know. And I think that's really important, especially on the nourished soul. Like we're all trying to nourish our bodies, our minds, our souls. Where do you, and we talked about this, I've talked about this on the podcast too. And I think we've had a couple people on that have talked about that balance between pushing yourself. I call it walking the line. I think I even called it walking the line on one of the
Yes,
episodes where
on the
you,
nourishing your nervous system one you did.
I did. Yeah. I talk about how really being kind and gentle to ourselves and loving to ourselves. And then, of course, being of service in the world. But then also, kind of at the same time, we're being gentle, pushing ourselves because you never know what you can do until you have to do it or until you're kind of pushed to do it. And that's a fine line I have found.
A very fine line. Absolutely. And that kind of leads me into one of the other podcasts that I absolutely loved, which was changing our subconscious programming.
Oh, yeah, Ellie.
I think that really showed me that like walking the line and like realizing that like I am a soul and I need to figure out how to change the loops that are just constantly going on in my head and how to truly like heal from inside so that I can show up with that positive energy, with that nervous system that's calm, with, the joy instead of the anxiety. That podcast like shifted things for me. Like,
Hmm.
I can actually change my programming. I thought my programming was just like, okay, it happened. Like, it's you now.
Yeah, no. Yeah, we can change that subconscious programming for sure.
Working on it still,
And
but
what was important, yeah, I love, and Ellie reached out to me, who's in California, reached out to me after the hurricanes and said, "How can I support you? Let's jump on." I mean, she literally kind of wouldn't let me not jump on an emergency call together to do some Psych K. We did a little bit of Psych K, but we did some somatic work that was really powerful. She had me actually cover, I was at our friend's house and so, just up in a corner, like doing this work. So she had me doing some things. She had me cover my mouth with both hands and then scream into my hands. And at first, my brain was like, I don't think I can. What if everybody downstairs worries? But you couldn't hear it. And I don't even know if you could, but it was so helpful to have that release. Yeah, so that wasn't on the pot. That was another thing, but that one was important. I actually went and got trained in Psych K the week after I had that podcast with Ellie. Because I got off the podcast with her and was like, I think I want to learn about this. And they happened to have a training the next week really close to me. I was like, okay, I guess this is meant to be. So
Absolutely.
that was a good one. Yeah.
So good. Which one did you have that you loved? Another one.
I was thinking about, I love so many of them, but one of them, Sally K. Norton was on talking about superfoods. And I had we were kind of getting away from talking about nutrition and talking more about quantum health at that time. And so I was like, I don't know if this is really going to fit. And we should probably talk about like some of the soul ones were my original intent. So I really loved having anybody that was talking about the soul. I loved having that on. But I was surprised at how much I loved Sally and how much I connected and how good that podcast was with Sally K. Norton. Cause I was a little bit like, no, are we really going to go back into nutrition here? But it was a really good one.
Absolutely. And I think like as you're saying about the soul, and we should really touch on those subjects
Mhm.
or those podcast episodes.
Yeah.
Every single one of these touches on the soul. Like
Right.
there's such a
Right.
depth to each episode that it's like it's transformed my soul in the last 3 years, where I just feel such a peace about every single time I listen. I'm like, wow,
Mm.
like I can take just a big old breath, and I feel at peace.
Mhm.
But one that I feel like you're saying, doesn't feel like it aligned, but it 1000% aligns, was the one with pelvic floor health, Ollie.
Yeah,
I feel like that one, I was like, does this really fit?
I know.
But then it did. And I didn't realize how much it would fit into my own life, because I have dealt so deeply with pelvic floor issues. And so I broke my tailbone when I was younger. Did not realize it until I was in pelvic floor therapy. And a therapist was like, hey, did you know that your tailbone's sitting completely to the right of your body, not in the middle? And so we had to go through all this floor therapy work. And I think it's truly set me up for when I do end up having kids, that I don't have this traumatic experience because nothing's aligned where it's supposed to be.
Right.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. Polly's adorable. And that was when she reached out to us and wanted to be on the show, and I just liked her. So I was like, we're going to make it work because you know how I am. I'm like, if it feels right. And I think there were several episodes where I did not even really know that much about the person, but it was this friend recommended, oh, I think Jess, my
Mhm.
friend Jess ended up on the podcast, and I didn't even know she was in Florida. At the end of it, we're like, "Hey, where are you?" "I'm Florida." "I'm Florida too." And then we became friends. I mean, just yeah, it's such and I think I've had her on. We had her on twice because we ended up really enjoying our chemistry together. And that's the thing; you never know when there's going to be chemistry. And I think some of the others, like Trisha Barker's laugh, I can still hear. I liked everybody that came on and talked about near death experiences because that's really near and dear to my heart. Um, I got interested in near death experiences when I was 19 or 20 years old, um, and started kind of studying near death experiences of children because that was fascinating to me. The way that they would talk about it, and kids haven't really been exposed to that much, the ideas that they have, and for them to be so similar across cultures and across these kids, I just thought that was
Mhm.
telling, I guess. It was like, you can't really call it necessarily evidence of the other side, but it was for me, it felt like an evidence of a soul, evidence that we are guided and protected, and that there is something much larger than us that's in charge. So, those were some of my favorites too, and Trisha Barker, her laugh, just to have her on laughing was a joy.
Absolutely. And when I was looking through the podcast, I came across hers and I was like, oh, I want to add hers in. But I really didn't know how to start the conversation of that necessarily on this podcast. So I was like, how do I say I just love near death experiences? But like you're saying, it is so interesting. And it has always been very intriguing to me on like, there's movies that I've watched and I'm like, how is this so similar of the stories that people tell? And
Yeah.
then there was someone, it's been so long that I do not remember his name, but he really talked about how he believes that we get to choose our
Oh,
life before we.
David,
Oh my gosh.
David, so
We could be friends. I'm
yeah.
like, he is so wise. And like, I don't know how much I like believe of it or how much I don't or anything like that. But I'm like, I want to know more. Like
Yeah.
that we got to choose this life. And also it's almost helped me where I'm like, the hardships, I'm like, oh, I chose this.
I
This is
honestly,
coming.
yeah. And Pace, that came up for me today when before we got on, I was like, I don't know if I can do this today. I'm kind of fragile. Like coming off of it's not just coming off the traumatic experiences that I've just had, but with my child, like anytime there's something a little funky going on with my child or health issues, like I just feel very unsettled. And I have to go back to that. Okay, if whether it's true or not, right? If we choose this life and our kids choose us as the parent, that it's all perfect. Like even the stuff that we don't like, that we're complaining about, the traumatic experiences, I don't think any of it gets wasted. So even if we veer off, because I think we have choice. I was like, free will, that's the word. I was like, what's the word? Will. Free will. We have free will. So we can move around, but I don't think if we step into a direction that isn't necessarily aligned with what we really need to be doing, I think we'll be corrected. And I also think none of it gets wasted. And I had to keep reminding myself just this morning of like, we are all on a journey. Some of it we will like, some of it we will not, some of it will feel traumatic, but it is all on purpose. Like there is a greater purpose. And I find for me personally, working with anxiety, people that struggle with anxiety and my own anxiety, I don't find the opposite of anxiety to be peace. Like, I think that's interesting. It's a piece of it. I find the opposite to be trust. Because when we can trust in the uncertainty of life and how uncertain everything is around us, then I think we find the peace and the calm through the trust. And so I just had to remind myself this morning, like to trust that life is unfolding exactly as it's supposed to be, mine and my child's. Yeah.
That I never thought of it like that because I've dealt with anxiety my whole life. I don't know a moment that I haven't.
Mhm.
And even like during wedding planning, and I know a lot of people are like, oh, that's like, it's a blessing that you get to have a wedding. It is. It is still very stressful. And when I look back at it, I'm like, yeah, if I would have just trusted, I would have had peace. And like, of course, my dad and Caleb are like, "Ah, just trust, it's gonna be fine." And I'm like, yeah, but my hair and makeup artist canceled 13 days before my wedding. So I'm like, how am I supposed to trust? I need to feel beautiful on this day. And I'm, frantic. But if I would have just trusted and it did work out, then like I wouldn't have been as anxious.
Right. Well, I think that's important because I've talked about that on the podcast too. So let me see what you think about it. Because I think a lot of us that have known anxiety pretty much our whole lives, like I thought anxiousness was just kind of my disposition. So I was like, I didn't think it could be solved. Like, I was like, that's just how I am, how I'm wired. But I really have most of my life felt like that is that anxiousness is what gets things done.
Mhm.
And I have a husband that's the same, sort of like, oh, it's fine. Oh, it'll be fine. And you're just like, no, how do you think this is going to be fine? Like, I feel like me being a basket case about it is why it's fine. And I've really had to talk about reprogramming that subconscious reprogram. I've had to really work to reprogram that I don't have to be an anxious mess for things to be successful or work out. And that has been some serious inner work.
Yeah. I haven't fully gotten there yet.
I don't know if there is a getting there. Yeah.
Yeah, I do know that like when I was 18, 19 years old, I did have an experience where like the the anxiety that I had felt did change. I was at a passion conference and something changed inside of me. You can say it was God. I believe it was God, but that depth of anxiety did shift in my heart. But all in the same breath, not to get too deep, but like the anxiety shifted, but the depression did not shift.
Oh, yeah.
So I have
Good.
had to
Mhm.
really work through the depression aspect. And also, whenever something small happens, I immediately fear that I am jumping back into the depression pit. And
Yeah.
so I'm immediately just like on guard. And I'm like, that's what's almost creating my anxiety more so these days than anything. That I'm like, I'm married now. I have this life that I have to continue working at, but I'm scared I'm going to jump back in that pit. And so
Oh,
that's where I'm kind of at right now with my journey.
oh, yeah, that's such a good point, and I was there for, unfortunately, years. My prayer for you is that it's not years for you. Yeah, because that's a really important part. The body can only handle anxiousness, being in that stress response for so long before we flop. And then it's natural, it is normal for the body to then have a counterbalance, which we call depression. But then the anxiety that is gonna come back, I remember being so anxious because 'cause you're right, these experiences that we can have that are really spiritual experiences, if in my opinion, but you can call it whatever you want. But something changes in your heart and you feel a bit better. Not that you are never anxious. We're not supposed to be never anxious, but that fear that you are gonna be back in the pit of things, that it's not, really safe. Like, we're not out of the woods. Are we out of the woods yet? Are we out of the woods? It's like, I may not be out of the woods completely, and that is a real thing, and to me, that is the hardest place to trust. Like, to trust that it is gonna all be okay, and for me, what I had to keep reminding myself is I came through it once, I might have to come through it again, but I can do it. Like,
Exactly.
I am not abandoning myself here. And that has been really helpful to me now in my 50s of like what I know to be true about me. Like, I know that you have fierce mama energy. I know your mama. I know that it runs through you and will run to your children, whether you have children or not, it runs through you. I have that same kind of mama bear. I will never abandon my children. Like, I will always be doing whatever I can to support them, and whatever happens, like that was my big saying is like we gonna work it out. Right? That's my thing. We gonna work it out. It may not look pretty, it may not be what we thought, but we're gonna work it out. And having to really do that for myself, turn that inward and say, I will not abandon myself here. I will not shove the parts of me that I don't like or the parts that aren't very pretty and are kind of dark or whatever. I won't shove those and relegate those to the shadows of my psyche. I will always work it, like, we gonna work it out. If it's showing up, we gonna work it out.
Yep, I 100% agree. And that I've really had to pull myself out of depression
Yeah.
with that in mind. My
Yeah.
dad dealt with it for a very long time, and he actually has gotten on the other side of it and does not deal with depression anymore. And I know that it's because he did it. It's something I can do too. And I think that's
There you
what's
go.
really cool is like having parents that like have been willing to share. And so I get to look at him and be like, wait, like I'm fine. He got through it, like I'm gonna get through it. And so it's a beautiful journey. I think it's just sometimes the depression side will get you in a hole where it's like,
Mm.
is it beautiful? And then you have to remind yourself it is beautiful.
Right, you have to look around and see something that is beautiful to remind yourself that life can still be beautiful because it is a dark hole, and it's depression is isolating, it's scary, it feels like it's not ever gonna go away, and so I really love that you have your dad to look at, and it makes it really I mean, it's helpful to understand that we can share. We don't have to share all of our stories with all the people, but when we share, it actually helps somebody. that our wounds are right up against the gift that we have to give.
Absolutely. And reminding yourself to get outside. Don't sit inside and be depressed. At least be outside
At
and be
least be outside and be depressed. We were just talking about that on a run this morning. My friend Eileen we were running, and she has a friend that's got, it's super stressful. Like she's in her 90 something year old mom is living with her. She's got health stuff coming up. It's a lot. It's a lot of stress. And she's like, but have you been on a walk? And she's like, no, I don't like to exercise. She's like, I'm not even talking about exercising. Literally take yourself outside, because even if you are depressed, at least be depressed outside. It helps to get fresh air, it helps to get the sunshine, and it helps to earth. So you might as well just go out there and touch a tree.
absolutely. Yeah.
Those things seem so, does that not seem so basic, but also kind of condescending in the midst of trauma and depression and extreme anxiety?
Yeah, it does. And it's like, why there was someone on the podcast that was like, no, I don't want to get outside. Stop telling me to get outside. And then she got outside and she was like, wow, this is healing. That's how I feel a lot. But like that's the conversation within my own brain. I'm like, get outside. No, you're fine. Keep watching the TV. Like eat the popcorn. Like you're fine. And as soon as I get outside, I'm like, oh, this is what I needed.
It's kind of back to that being kind to ourselves, but also holding ourselves accountable. And like we do actually have to push ourselves to do things that we don't want to do. Like we were talking, like Haley,
Yeah,
I know she doesn't feel good when she shows up with a beautiful smile and is giving. And I'm like, how is she doing this? And I've talked to her, you've talked to her, I'm sure, after the fact. And she's like, I don't know how I was doing it. It felt important. And you just, sometimes you have to, the show has to go on. And like really honoring that, to feel what you feel. There's both and.
it's a hard mixture between the two, but really just discipline creates that beauty that I think oftentimes we miss because we're not disciplined enough.
Yeah, my dad, I mean, my beautiful stepfather that was so wise, that said, he was all about discipline. He was all about, but he said to Haley, he didn't even say this to me, but thankfully Haley shared it to me. He's like, Haley, when she was probably 19 and was talking about girl talk, and he said, Haley, you have to decide, do you want a life of success, or do you want a life of significance? And Haley was like, just trying to decide between for profit, nonprofit. Like she was trying to make some big decisions. And to me, what he said to her and what I know is like he spent most of his life really worrying about success and what the outer vision of success and what that looks like for a man, and money and business and what he learned in his later years was, it's really about having a significant impact on the people that you love and on other people. So yeah, I'm so grateful that Haley shared that with me. But I know my dad was all about discipline, and for him, a life of significance, a life where you're in service of to others, in service of the greater good, is a life that is disciplined. So I sometimes push against that a little bit. I'm like, how disciplined do we have to be? But I know that when I push myself to do something I didn't think I could do, how proud are you? You're like, look at what I did. I was like, I didn't think I could do that. Yeah. Well, I'm so grateful for you. I'm grateful for the show and the listeners and all of the people who have been on the show, the guests. All of the episodes have had an impact on me. And so I'm grateful. And that's why we decided not to rebrand, but actually leave the Nourished Soul. To me, it's like, it would be like just changing a child or something. Like you can't, like, no, this was really important. We want this library to be here and to be called the Nourished Soul for a reason. And now it's time for a new chapter, and we're gonna just start fresh with the new chapter. So
And so excited for the new chapter while also being a bit sad to leave this chapter. There is so much beauty in it, and I'm excited that it's staying here so I can just re listen. And we would love, well, we didn't even talk about this, but I would love for others, the ones that have listened, what podcast was your favorite? I
Yeah.
would love to know that and why, so I can go back and listen and hear what you heard. So,
Yeah, I think that would be wonderful if people would share kind of what their favorites were and why. That would be great. And who knows, we could come back. We're leaving it. So we can come back and do special episodes. We can do whatever we want. And I am really excited for quantum mental health just to see, just it's been the direction that we've been heading, that I've been heading for a while. So it's not that big of a leap, but also just I wanted everything to be a little more coherent and make a little more sense
it
of what.
creates a lot of clarity and also brings there are new plans in place that I think so many will be blessed with. But I think this had to happen for people to be blessed with what we are working on.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I do know. And there's a little piece of me that's like, don't let go. Let's just keep going. This has been good. And there's another piece of me that wanted, this is why I wanted to do this episode to honor it and also properly say goodbye to something that has been so important. Yeah, really to both of us. So,
part of my
yeah,
life.
but we're gonna keep going in a new direction, but a similar direction. And so I'm really, yeah, I'm super excited. And I'm so glad that you're with me and on board to do it. And I love watching your growth and all of the beautiful things and the blessings that are happening in your life. So grateful for that. We knew that was going to happen. There might have been times where you like, I don't think it's going to happen. I was like, okay, you're a beautiful soul. It will happen. Yeah. So,
Well, just a reminder for people out there, whatever you are, hoping for, praying for, looking to the future for, like, it will always find you. The good will.
yes, if you want it, it's
Yeah.
looking for you. What's the saying? Is that Rumi? I don't remember who says it, but it's some wise person that said, what you are seeking is seeking you. So don't give up. Never, never, never give up. That's what my dad used to say. Never, never, never give up on yourself and trust, right? We're back to trust. Trust that it's just hard to think the universe has your back and to trust the universe when you're in the pit of like, it's just not feeling like it. Yeah.
Are you sure?
Yeah. Are you a sir? This is like, yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you, my dear. Thanks for doing this episode. Thanks for being a big part of the Nourished Soul podcast for all these years and a big, warm, wonderful part of my life.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. It's been an honor.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to this episode. Just want to remind you that we would love to hear your feedback, and it really helps the show if you rate the show and leave comments. I also want to just let you know that I am doing free classes. So I've been doing those every other month. They're usually related to mood and quantum health. So I have done one, and you can watch the replays of the ones that I've already done, and all of that is free. So I did several. I have a food mood talk that I did, and I have mood and mitochondria. So we're talking all about what mood has to do with healthy mitochondria. And the next one that's coming up, July 19th, is going to be on circadian timing. So really fixing your life to help support your circadian rhythms and how those of us in the northern hemisphere can utilize summertime to prepare for winter. So if you're somebody who has a lot of mood issues that come along in the winter, if you have seasonal affective disorder or something similar to that, whether it's got a label or not, you just know that you start to feel a lot moodier, a lot more depressed, or even anxious in different seasons. I want to talk to you about circadian rhythms. So that's a free class, and I would love to have you join that. You can come to my website, nourished-soul.com, and go to events and look for live classes and register for that class. I'd love to have you there. And if there are other classes that you're more interested in, you can watch those replays. And I hope that that is helpful to you. That's the whole point of all that we do, is to be helpful to you. Have a great week.